All right, we're going to call to order. This is the Aspen City Council work session for April 18th, 2022. Tonight on our agenda, we have two items. One is the entrance to Aspen Education Project, and the second is an opportunity for council board reports and council member updates, and the opportunity to have some discussion up here at the table about other items. We'll get right into it. With no other business to attend to, we'll start with the entrance to Aspen Education. And we have Diane, Trish, Pete are here to have some fun.
Yes, we are, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us here today. As you mentioned, we're going to talk about entrance to Aspen, and I'd first just like to introduce the project team, which includes Trish Aragon, City Engineer, Pete Reich, Division Manager for Engineering, Jack Dannenberg, Project Manager, Lynn Rumbaugh, Mobility Manager, and Mike Horvath, Senior Project Manager. And with that, we can jump to the next slide. So the one thing that I will ask today, and the mayor will help me out with this, is we'd really like to leave here with clarity, in particular around community education versus community engagement. That'll be, we'll ask for clarity around that. And in addition to that, you've got 5 questions in front of you. You don't have to memorize them. We'll bring this slide back up at the end. And these, we'll want to walk through these one by one and then make sure we understand what council wants. As far as kind of going through today's presentation, we are going to start off with a couple technical elements, and so it might be helpful to kind of go through the slide presentation. It's only about 15 minutes, and because you may have a question that will get answered on the next slide. And that being said, Mike is over there with the whiteboard and willing to write down council questions. So if you have one, you can either jot it down yourself or you can throw it up there. And if you really want, we can stop and discuss it. With that, here's what we'll be doing today. Trish will be talking a little bit about the background. What is the Record of Decision, sometimes called the ROD? What our proposed work plan is, and you'll remember that John came to you in September, and then November 1. In November 1, council directed staff to come back with a plan. You allocated $150,000 to update technical documents, engage with CDOT, and create a public education campaign. So that's the bulk of what we'll be talking about today. And in addition to the budget, and then we'll get into talking about, at the end of the day, what does council really want to see on this? So with that, Trish.
I will try not to use acronyms. I'm going to try and say the words completely without using acronyms, but
good luck. All that alphabet soup coming up.
So here's some of the graphics that we have for the preferred alternative that's outlined in the Record of Decision. This includes a combination of highway and intersection improvements, a transit system, and an incremental transportation management program. Now, it's been close to 15 years. It was in 2007, the last time we had community engagement regarding the Record of Decision and the entrance to Aspen. And these were the 2007 graphic here. That was the leading edge graphics at the time, and 98 next to it. But this is all we have right now to communicate what the entrance to Aspen is to our community, and to make sure that, or to be able to communicate, what the Record of Decision is. So council recognized that these are dated graphics, and these are these need to be updated if we're going to have a meaningful dialogue with the community regarding the Record of Decision and the entrance to Aspen. So the goal of this is to have a shared understanding in the community of what the entrance to Aspen project is, and part of that is to update graphics like these. The next is the components of the Record of Decision, and Rachel, thank you for clarifying in the memo. It wasn't necessarily complete as far as all the components of the record of decision that were completed. So this is a list of what's completed. What's not included on this list includes Harmony Road improvements, which was the highway underpass and the pedestrian underpass, the realignment of the Owl Creek Road and the new signals at Buttermilk, the conveyance of right-of-way that CDOT acquired across Marolt for the 2-lane and light rail only in exchange for the Mills Ranch property to be used as open space. So that's over by the Brush Creek Park and Ride. It also includes our bus rapid transit system, which has been implemented throughout the valley, and various traffic management programs that have been implemented, including but not limited to our in-town buses, the downtowner, paid parking, things like that. You can go to the next slide. So much has changed since that 2007 reevaluation. So we have the 1998 record of decision. Then we have a reevaluation that was done in 2007. And since that time, the Aspen community has a new audience that will need to be engaged. There are people that weren't here in 2007, weren't part of that discussion back in 2007, so we'll need to re-engage that part of the community that may not know what all these acronyms like ROD and ETA and PA and all those things mean.
What are the long version of that?
Consequently, we need to do a technical evaluation to determine if a reevaluation is needed to preserve the record of decision. You have a certain time frame where the record of decision is fresh, and over a period of time it does go stale. And so we need to reevaluate to see if there's anything that we need to preserve our existing record of decision and the preferred alternative. And we also need to determine what's changed since 2007. I mean, technology has changed, and this community has changed, and our needs have changed. So those types of things are going to be included in the technical evaluation portion of this project. Lastly, we have a bridge that's over 60 years old, right? The Castle Creek Bridge. And it's nearing its useful life. And as a community, we need to determine what the future of a new bridge will look like. As you know, this bridge is emergency egress for the community, both for mass evacuation and first responders, access to the hospital. So that's an important piece of this entrance to Aspen. Here we have the budget. As Diane mentioned, it's $150,000 split between the technical portion of the project and the community engagement portion. Let's go on to the next slide to talk about each of these steps in more detail. So the technical scope of work is to obtain clarity on as is. Where are we today? This includes answers to the following questions. We need to first get all our existing information, because there's a lot of information. A lot of studies have been done over the past 20 some odd years, and we need to gather that all in one place. We also need to define the right-of-way and depict that on a map so that the community can clearly understand what this project is. You saw that 1998 record of decision graphic, and that doesn't clearly show the community the extent of the entrance to Aspen and the preferred alternative. So that's where knowing the right-of-way and clearly depicting that will be helpful. Also, we need to research technologies like trackless tram, see if that's feasible. Develop cross-sections, that's also needed, of the preferred alternatives, again, so that the community can understand the project and what we're talking about here. We're also including an assessment of the current conditions of what I'm calling the old Castle Creek Bridge. It's their current bridge. and then what has changed since the 2007 reevaluation of the ROD. So we are currently in this process. We have already hired HNTB. Ralph Trapani is going to be the technical advisor to start this technical analysis. So he's already started to accumulate that background information. As you know, Ralph Trapani is a local transportation expert here in the Valley with over 40 years of experience. He worked for CDOT during the time of the record of decision, and he actually is the author of the 1998 record of decision. So he also helped build the highway through Glenwood Canyon and Snowmass Canyon. He managed the replacement of the Maroon Creek Bridge. He worked on the development of the Bus Rapid Transit Program and the dedicated bus lanes here in Aspen. So given his extensive experience, Ralph is a leading expert on the entrance to Aspen. So I think we're in good hands with his abilities to analyze where we are in this process. The next part, before we start the community education process, we do need to engage CDOT. We call it step 2, but it's running in conjunction with step 1. We'll need to determine the process for engaging CDOT, and we need to determine any consequences we may face with the Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA, in opening up the ROD. Additionally, we'll need to determine the process for including the entrance to Aspen in the 10-year statewide transportation improvement plan, which is the STIP. Now, I want to touch on that as far as opening up the ROD and any consequences. You can go to the next slide. So this is our record of decision is unique in that it includes these 10 objectives, community objectives. And the reason why it's unique is not all RODs in this current day includes these types of objectives. And so we feel it's important that the community understand if we end up as a community deciding to do something different than the ROD, that the community understands what those risks are or consequences are if that ROD is reopened. And here's those objectives for council to go through, to look at.
Trish, I'm going to just interrupt real quick here. So council, the community doesn't get to decide what those 10 factors are. That's the key point here. That this is criteria that's coming from the state to us. So you may lose some things of community value opening it up, and that's what needs to be explored as part of that analysis.
The step 3 in this is the public education process, and the reason we had that $40,000 to $75,000 is that it depends. We haven't put it out to RFP because first and foremost we wanted to come to council and say, what is it you want? As it's scoped right now, it is a public education process, and Sarah and I and a lot of folks involved in local government. This is a graphic that comes from the International Association of Public Participation, and this was a version that KU did, so I had to get it because go Jayhawks. So what this basically says is there is a continuum of community engagement, and on this particular project, we can start with inform, right? Public education is about informing people. It's not necessarily gathering their feedback or creating a task force or a panel. It is strictly information, and that's what an education process is. It doesn't, if we continue on this, let's say we start with a public education process this fall, and then the council wants to continue forward, we will absolutely need to move along this continuum and have more of a community involvement, community collaboration in what is more traditionally called community engagement process, or something that looks more like, frankly, what you're doing right now with the moratorium work and the STR work. Right? That is not what's proposed in here. And the reason I'm being a little bit on the pedantic side is we want to make sure as staff, we get this piece right and know what you actually want. So with that, we can, and by the way, the elements, the kind of the nuts and bolts of this would be a website and a document library. So, right, there will be community members who want to go through and read the environmental impact statement or the EIS, who want to read the record of decision. So having that available to the public. Also a print campaign that informs people, has the new graphics that we'll be having developed. Community surveying polling. Going out to the people who vote and doing a statistically significant survey at the end of this process to understand where is the community and what is it they understand and what do they want to do moving forward. We would have public open houses, but they would be different than the moratorium ones, right? It's informing, hey, let's show you what this information is rather than tell me what you think about this. And then some videos on grassroots TV. Though I've watched the ones that are out there now, they're informative, and we at least have to get the clothing updated. Next slide.
So here's the timeline for this part of the education piece of the entrance to Aspen. It's the technical analysis and engaging CDOT, which we're currently in the process, and that will continue this summer. Then we have the community education portion of this project, which Diane just mentioned. That also includes meeting with the Picken County Commissioners and also Snowmass Town Council. We're planning on meeting with them this May to do this presentation that we're doing currently with council, to inform them of this project and what it's going to involve. Also, the presentation of education materials. So we're gonna package these education materials, but we want to present them to council before they're presented to the community. So we're planning on doing that this fall. And then in addition, what Diane mentioned as far as the open houses, the video, print, campaign, website launch, all to occur this fall. And then the public poll at the end of this year, early next year is the current timeline or schedule.
So we're back to the point where I hand it back to you, Mr. Mayor, and I think this is a great point to ask for question. We may want to start with questions that council has before we jump into these questions, would be my recommendation.
Thank you. All right, council questions at this time. Start with Ward.
A couple of questions on the record decision, the land bridge and the cut and cover. Are those, that's the same section of the open space? And what exactly is a land bridge? Is that just an elevated section of road, or what is a land bridge?
That's a good question, and I've tried to pin down, Ralph. Okay, what's the difference between a land bridge and a tunnel? And I honestly, I didn't get much clarity, except that the point of this is that, there is that space for, people to walk across and wildlife to, walk across, so that it'll, have this continual access, over to the golf course and to the Meroldt open space. But as far as the, Pete's gonna write something here. Hey, Pete, do you have a? You can say it.
You can speak. You can.
Essentially, the big difference is you don't need the mechanical systems for airflow under what they call a land bridge.
So the cut and cover is the tunnel, and the land bridge is, how does that
Land
differ?
bridge is the actual definition, yeah. So the cut and cover goes underneath, and then they put the land bridge over.
Well, that's the cut, and then the cover is the land bridge.
Correct.
Same thing.
There you go.
Okay,
One thing.
so there's one option there. It's in essence, it's a cut and cover / land bridge.
For clarity, though, a land bridge is typically elevated.
As opposed to dug in.
Right, so instead of maintaining a flat plane across, a relatively flat plane across Meroldt, you have a man-made feature up, over, and down for that access point.
Which allows them to not build some of the ventilation or other structures underneath because they're giving clearance, et cetera.
And I think it had to do with the length of it, too. It was only, was it 300 yards or 300?
400 feet.
400 feet, and so that also didn't require the ventilation. And the term cut and cover kind of originally came from the tennis courts they built at the at the Meadows, where, you know, they're not ventilated underground parking garage, they have a tennis court on top. And they have airflow, and so that was kind of this concept there of a cut and cover tunnel.
So the cut and cover is 400 feet, and the requirements for a mechanical system now might have shifted. So that
Which
might
direction?
not, more conservative.
Because I was going to actually dovetail onto that. If that's memorialized, that 400 feet, that length of it, the images that you just showed, I was like, well, couldn't you make that even longer? But you're answering the question is, that'll have to be resolved.
Yeah.
Probably.
And that's part of this process, is to understand, okay, you know, things have changed since the criteria was set up and these designs were initially set up. And then also to be able to understand, you know, those grade changes and what that looks like, that's part of this project too, to graphically show the community what this will look like.
Yeah, if we're having trouble finding out the difference between a cut and cover and a land bridge, I think we need to have a lot more clarity going forward. Next question. The roundabout to Cemetery Lane, that land that road is going to be reclaimed as open space? Is that the idea?
Correct.
Okay. So that means that the Castle Creek Bridge goes back to the control of the city of Aspen, but in essence, if it's used as an emergency exit, it would have to go to Cemetery Lane.
So we've likely not figured out that level of engineering to know whether we'll keep an emergency route off of the existing bridge to the roundabout for emergency egress, but that is something in future planning we would sort out. There's some merits of not joining the traffic off of the new bridge and the old bridge at the roundabout during an evacuation just because of volume, right? It's a funnel. And there's some merits of keeping that traffic headed over down,
Power Plant Road?
no,
McLean?
Cemetery Lane and over to McLean Flats. So, but we've done no study of that level of detail to know the merits of maintaining that section just for emergency egress.
But as I recall, that was part of using part of the Merled open space was to reclaim, because it was purchased with public money, it had been used as open space, to reclaim an equal amount of space as the abandonment of that Cemetery Lane to roundabout section of road.
That, in addition to the purchase of the property over by Brush Creek Park and Ride.
Okay.
So there's actually, it's in the plus if you include also that purchase of that parcel.
I lied, that wasn't my last question. Our rating on the Castle Creek Bridge is 50.3, and it needs to be 50 to get on the CDOT's list to be replaced. And we have an improvement project for the western joint of the Castle Creek Bridge.
Yes.
Is that going to increase the number, or is that going to be, are we shooting ourselves in the foot on getting on CDOT's list by fixing that western
Okay.
joint?
First of all, the rating, is currently a 62, and yeah, John did mention during the last council meeting, but when it drops below 50, that's when it starts to, hit, the radar for bridge replacement.
Okay,
Now,
I'm
as
sorry, I
far-
thought I read in the packet that was 50.3.
I guess that was an error on our part, it's actually 62.
Okay,
So as far as the work that's being done right now, or will be done this fall on that joint, it, I don't think it's a bad thing to extend the life of our bridge. I mean, that's not a, but when we did the work last time on the Castle Creek Bridge, the rating didn't go down. It stayed stable, which is
Good thing.
Which is
We're
similar
treading water.
to, what?
We're treading water.
Well, that's similar to an increase, right? Over time, it didn't decrease, it stabilized at that 62 because of the work that we did help that. Will this work on the joint help? It possibly could.
Okay, and then
But it's not going to increase. It's going to stay. I mean, it won't go, 68, 60.
The
whatever.
analogy I'd give you is you could repair your roof or you could replace it. We're repairing it in order to make sure things stay safe, but it's not going to take,
It's not a new roof.
it's not going to really fix the community's needs for the long run. It's a matter of addressing the immediate safety issues that are caused by the expansion going differently than how it should be.
it's really up to the city council and the community to decide to get this bridge replacement on the CDOT's 10-year list, I think. Is that correct?
And that is, to get it on the,
Why don't you describe how you get a project on the list? Because this is sort of new territory for some of the council members to know how that process works.
so it's first a process through, as a county, you need to come to a consensus on those projects that you feel are important as a county. So CDOT looks not by city, but by county. So on a county basis, you need to come to an agreement on those projects that are important to the county. Then it raises up to the Intermountain, TPR transportation,
Planning region.
yes, thank you.
Thank you, Siri.
And it competes on that regional basis to get on the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Plan. However, there are ways to, some projects are able to bypass that process and to, get on the STIP without going through that process. But that's typically the process is first the county, then the IMTPR, and then the STIP.
When you say it competes with other projects at that level of the acronym that Rachel said, how does it compete? Is there a scoring system? Is it based on your advocacy as an individual human? What's the criteria?
Well, they're going to certainly look at regional support. So we're fortunate in that we have a formal, formal committee, the EOTC, as a regional body to, support projects. So that certainly is part of it. To be honest, IMTPR is kind of,
Squidgy.
well, you sit there and you pitch your project and you compete based on your presentation.
Got it.
There's review criteria that the reviewers utilize that you try to match up against, but I would not say that it's a clean-cut process. It is definitely a negotiated process with every DOT I've ever worked with
Got it.
in the country.
Just to elaborate a little further, we're in with Eagle County and Garfield County and some of the other regions here. So we're always competing with projects on I-70 for I-70 congestion, I-70 new exits or entrances, things like that can be, they have high levels of congestion, they have high population growth. And it's been quite a while, more than a decade and a half since I've been at one of the TPR meetings. But I recall watching the projects add up to, just about $1 trillion, and including Eagle County had put on rail to all the way up to Eagle, and they wanted a new bridge over the Colorado River, an exit ramp to take people more directly to the Costco and their airport, as opposed to having to go in early on or around it. So, you're getting rated by your fellow counties and commissioners and things like this. So there's a lot of magnanimity and support that for each other's projects. Oh, Lake County hasn't gotten anything for a long time. Yeah, we'll support that. But I would say that Picken County has been putting up fairly important but minor improvements to Highway 82 intersections. Maybe the Carbondale intersection was one of the last ones that got some. George Newman was our rep at the time with the Brian Pettit, and we really didn't hear any requests from the city to take forward at that time. But the transportation planning regions, at least how the state used to do it, was to divide a certain millions of dollars to each planning region each year in the 10-year plan. And so there could be 25 projects on that plan or 30, but only the top 3 had any chance of getting funded in the next X many years. Now, things have changed because there are earmarks again, and there's different federal pots that you can apply for that may not compete with the state dollars. And the state had gone to a process where some of their money could only be used for highways. The gasoline tax can only be used for highways. It's other monies they've put in there that can be used for transit support.
Got it.
It's a real complicated, arcane event.
Another thing that can influence a project's success on getting on the list is the local match. So how much money is the community going to, put forward towards this project? And that goes a long way too.
Got it. Thank you.
So part of this educational process is going to give more clarity to that process and the timeline involved?
Yes.
Okay.
I think to that point, Ward, what I understand from this team, and just to say it for public's benefit, you probably all know it, Castle Creek Bridge needs to be replaced in the next 15 to 20 years. And if we replace that and we don't have another bridge, we're going to be up the creek.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I think this is my last question, clarity on alternatives. And it said, I think in the packet, that the state hasn't really determined how trackless trams are categorized. When you look at the qualifications for a bus, a trackless tram is pretty close to an articulated bus. So I'd like to get clarity. I don't know if the state has clarity on that, but how, if we evaluate a trackless tram as an alternative, how that affects the environmental, it seems like it would be an improvement of impact on the environment, but if that's considered a major change, as opposed, if we put some other form of transportation in there, it's approved for light rail now. And to go to a trackless tram or a monorail or something else would require more work. So I'm really curious how a trackless tram is going to get categorized by the state.
Thanks, Ward. Sure, Rachel?
Great. I just want to really thank you and all the staff for a really well-prepared memo and a thoughtful approach of how we start to go about this. And I can throw out a few little smaller questions or comments based on what we've already heard. But my bigger request from this process is that we really are able to talk about the alternatives that were screened out and why. We keep hearing any number of these recirculating. Has this been looked at, or has that been looked at? And it's like, yes, actually they have, and there are some of the reasons why they were screened out as not the best of anything. And, you had mentioned the Maralt open space mitigation for the land has already been accomplished by the feds when they did the record of decision. And that, I believe, would be for either a dedicated busway and the 2 regular general traffic lanes, or the 2 general traffic lanes and the light rail. It's more about our public's open space vote of how we can use the Maralt. But the land has already been mitigated back then in that day. And it was a collection of open space takes. when you really get down to it. It wasn't just the Merle property, it was the edges that were needed from the golf course for the roundabout, and the edges of the Merle property, the Moore property that were needed for the roundabout, and the edges of open space that we gave them for the bus lanes. So there was a total compilation of how many acres were taken, and then that was compensated back. So the land bridge may have restored a little bit of it, but that wasn't the major thrust of the land that they purchased and dedicated. And most of that is actually kind of below Shale Bluffs and Brush Creek Intercept Lot. And it's a very important habitat for elk crossing and for the river safety and things like that. So that was what was agreed to at the time. And other things are there's some grade support with the topography for going down to a cut and cover, but it's not easy for me or anyone to say without those side sections you talked about, how high would it be or not be, or how depressed would a potential road be, or a rail corridor or a BRT corridor. So there's that. When that entrance to Aspen went forward as an environmental impact statement and they were developing alternatives, I don't know, Tori, you may have been there or not, or on the sidelines at that exact time, but I know we went through like alternatives A through G or H, before one was finally picked. And each time it was modified and improved, negotiations with the county to have county support going forward. So I don't know where or if they saved any of those alternatives before they got to the final, but it was very close to what we have now with modifications in language. For me, I've already texted you today, and one of the other things that's really important for me in updating this is what were the forecasts for valley-wide growth and how accurate were they? Because at the time, I recall everyone saying, oh, Basalt will never grow like that, and Carbondale will never grow like that, and we're never going to have that kind of traffic from Glenwood Springs. But I think that it'd be nice to know, because the city's transportation demand management measures were designed in some ways around how much traffic growth we'd have and how to maintain the mode split between private cars and the mass transit. And so they're saying you're going to have this many people in the year 2020 or whatever it was, and in order to capture X many on transit and X many staying in their cars, this is what you need to do. And so I'd love to know how accurate has that turned out to be. Unfortunately, we know from our traffic counts that we were not counting any cars on the by the shop, the city sneaky lane, old shop, whatever you want to call it. So I don't know if our numbers are off by 1,000 a day or 1,500 a day or what, but we do know that's certainly used as an alternate route into and out of Aspen. And so it's good to start getting numbers there. I think we approved funding for that not long ago. But going forward on a couple of areas, just to note, when I first got in office in 1991, there was an unrestricted 4-lane scheduled to come into Aspen with a record of decision in hand, and the intersection where the roundabout is was going to essentially be 8 lanes across, with 2 in each direction, and turn lane in the center, and shoulders, and multiple turn lanes. It just was a mess. And I had just started on the Clean Air Advisory Board and had learned through that about what they were talking about conformity. And that was a federal term of art, that no federal dollars could be spent on a project that made an existing PM10 area worse. And we were an existing PM10 non-attainment area. And so that record of decision was just turned over on CDOT director's desk. He said, we know we can't do this. You're here for some more intermodal transportation solutions. I don't know that we have that sort of PM10 protection now. I just want to put that out there. When we look through that list of things that the ROD had to deliver, it had to deliver solutions to our PM10, and we've been dealing with that heavily through street sweeping and the elimination of a lot of wood-burning fireplaces. So my fear has been that this record of decision, while it may not make it faster for drivers of single occupant vehicle cars, it's probably the greatest set of tools that the city of Aspen has to control traffic growth in the future. And by foregoing those and perhaps seeing a new record of decision embarked upon that has different goals, less congestion, quicker movement, getting through town, not controlling traffic growth, we could end up back with that unrestricted 4-lane type thing, or HOV only in the mornings, and put HOVs in with the bus rapid transit in the bus lanes, things that I think would just lead to kind of unlimited traffic growth. We do have tools now, and that ROD called for the city, as we are now, to engage in transportation demand management. And those tools in our box we've been using pretty aggressively, almost all of them. Paid parking and reduced parking. When you're at, was it $6 an hour during peak, or is it $8? I mean, how high do we go before that ends? Paying for ride shares, the GEMS, the rides around town, more extensive zone parking and limiting how people can park in the side neighborhoods without paying for it. They have to after 2 hours. And of course, we've gone forward with forming a regional transportation authority in that meantime. So we have the entire valley contributing and working towards that goal of controlled traffic growth. And then we've had recent tax increases, which we all voted for through the RAFTA 2040 program that supports the bus rapid transit. And those are major steps forward within the record of decision for us to be able to manage and control traffic growth. We get to a point where what is next as a community if we want to control traffic growth? And I very much fear that losing what we have accomplished in the record decision and finding different administrators or different attitudes when we go to do a new record of decision or amend it, we might get less than we have now in terms of those tools. And one of the final tools, and I think we all have seen it in our reports coming up for the EOTC retreat this week, is when do you start putting in congestion pricing? When do you start pricing free for HOVs, a certain cost for a single occupant vehicle during peak times of day, and use that money to support a greater frequency of shuttles to the park and ride lots, or more shuttles in town, or things like this. But it's the final real thing that you want to do if you're going to control traffic growth. I'm familiar with congestion pricing and hot lanes, as sometimes they're called, when I use 36 in between Boulder and Denver. And you can pay when you want to drive, or the free alternative is to get off at the Brush Creek Intercept lot and not pay. Or again, you don't pay perhaps if you are a carpool or you have some other things. But that would start to be the funding source that we would need to implement any additional TDMs if we wanted to, transportation demand management measures. And it has really struck me that if you get to the point where you're going to ask an open space vote of the public of the city of Aspen, because that's really all that's standing in the way right now of starting to try to implement the current ROD, but I think it can probably be improved upon, would be to make that public open space vote on the use of the MROLT contingent and include that there would always be congestion pricing management. And that would be part of the solution that goes along with the MROLT. So nobody would think it's going to come out with a bottle of paint over the bus lane markings and make it into an unrestricted 4-lane or anything like that. But I think we need to look to that really, what is our next step? What is our next step if the community's goals still hold that we don't want more traffic and more congestion? And it may be worth looking at a different measure as well for our community. We always just use the traffic counts on the Castle Creek Bridge. Maybe there's a different traffic count somewhere. But I know Skippy has been very interested in how could the entrance to support more pedestrianization of our downtown core and these sort of things. And there is a point at which, we have some tools in the box. We're utilizing all of them that we can so far. I'd like to go further, and I think that that's one way to really safeguard that this record of decision is not about how do you move the traffic jam into town, or how do you just make it a runaway for auto growth, but you could create an entrance that actually discourages auto growth by having a fee during peak periods when congestion's highest, and offering more free and more affordable alternatives to those to not drive. So those are my larger points I have for you right now, and thank you again on the work. I really look forward to this.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm just going to keep going in order instead of skipping around, so I'm just going to throw my questions out there. My first question starts with a statement. The roundabout work that's going on, you know, I was so hopeful that there would be opportunity for improving the roundabout functionality, and some of that for me was about the possibility of a down valley slip lane on the outside, right? The northernmost lane just being straightened out a little bit so people could get in and get going if they're going down valley. I state that, but then my question is, in the record of decision, are there any changes or modifications to the roundabout included in that? The depictions that we see don't necessarily show any. And I'm just wondering, is that the concept at this point, that the roundabout would more or less stay the same?
The current record of decision doesn't include, we built the roundabout according to the record of decision. Now, there are modifications as far as light rail and how that comes in around the roundabout, you know, on the south side there. But the configuration of the roundabout is consistent with the record of decision.
Thanks. Second thing, I wanted to clarify something. Every time we come to this conversation, I always talk about a reversible third lane bridge at Castle Creek. And in one of our work sessions over the last year and a half or so, I brought that up, and it was kind of included as a request for some information. The response that has been included over and over is about the current Castle Creek Bridge not having the capacity for 3 lanes. And my suggestion has been to replace the Castle Creek Bridge, not just redo the decking. So I just wanted to be clear that as I share that all the time about that potential, that it really hasn't been addressed in the questions that I've asked. I wasn't asking about modifying this bridge. I was talking about putting in a new bridge. The reason I've always suggested it is just because financially it's been presented to me as something that this community could afford and actually do. I'm not here to advocate for it or argue about it or anything. I just wanted to be clear about my suggestion in the past. A question for you is I believe it's stated that in the record of decision, the airport is cited as a multimodal facility. And does that just simply mean that cars, buses, and planes go there? Because we've been told that we don't have the opportunity to utilize any of the parking at the airport in any airport redevelopment for transit, meaning no long-term parking or day parking is going to be available. And I just asked that as a question because I thought I read that the airport is supposed to behave as some sort of multimodal hub, but are those clearly delineated that just means it's multimodal by the fact of what it functions as, but it's not supposed to lend itself more to multimodal? Do you know?
The record of decision does include the airport as this light rail hub.
With the parking.
Yeah, with the parking. So you would, the record of decision's concept
Yeah.
was that you drive to the airport and park there
Yeah.
and take the light rail from there into town.
Well, I love the sound of that. It's just that what we've been hearing has been that that's not.
Yeah, sitting in the airport advisory board meetings, I don't think that's the intention.
Can I jump in for
Right.
1 second, too? I don't know if this answers or not, but I recall that the record of decision identified that if we really want to keep our traffic levels at the same levels as 1995 or whatever the picked year was, that we were going to need about 3,000 parking spaces. And it was, Buttermilk was identified, the airport was identified, and also Brush Creek Intercept Lot was identified, and that's part of what the purchase there. Brush Creek Intercept Lot could have a second deck, without having ventilation and have more there. But since then, we've seen the RTA formed and then the additional funding with bus rapid transit. So the concept of park and ride lots on Highway 82 expanded to be in multiple places across the corridor as opposed to all concentrated up in Aspen. But that is one of the reasons why an update and looking at this would be valuable. But I do think it kind of shifted from, hey, 3,000 spots at the airport to spots throughout the valley and catch people sooner on rather than have them drive all the way up 82 just to the airport to change modes. Thank you.
And the priority at the airport has been how to better connect the arrivals area with the rapid bus transit as the priority in terms of transit improvements at the airport.
We'll make sure that there's clarity as part of this project on what was part of this project, part of their entrance to Aspen or the record of decision or preferred alternative in this project. So we'll have that clearly outlined.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I guess part of what I'm saying is I think it's going to take a little of everything. Like whether we build a new roadway or not, we're still going to need TDMs and other programs, and that airport piece and Buttermilk piece is something that has been talked about for a long time, and yet all the information I hear lately is that they're like, no, we're not doing that. So I was just wondering, but thank you. Clarity on that as we go forward would be great. Another question for you. I saw the renderings that you shared with us, which looked to me like the modified direct,
Yeah.
right? There was also, okay, so originally I think it was called a straight shot. Then it was a modified direct, or cut and cover was involved.
Straight shot was the first vote I was talking about that was already approved
Yep.
based on the public vote and the record decision that the state had and was interrupted because of air quality PM10.
Okay. Okay, and so it moved to, and then it moved to a modified direct. There was also a split shot. I'm just wondering, in the record of decision or the preferred alternative, is this the only current alternative that is approved under those documents, or is it open to like, oh, let us know if you like the split shot or the straight shot or the modified? It is this one.
Yeah, the split shot was one of the alternatives that was screened out because of the number of land, the amount of land take from two different highway segments and the crossing for wildlife, let alone some other concerns. But yeah, split shot was studied. That's why I said, let's bring out the alternatives that were studied and why they weren't accepted.
Because some people still refer to like down valley lanes going through the S curves and up valley lanes coming over the Merle. Okay, so this is where we are. Those others have been somewhat eliminated because of the preferred alternative. Okay, those are really the questions I have. I still struggle with this on two main items, and Rachel touched on this a little bit. Number one, would building a new entry thwart some of the efforts that we've been making? And I don't know the answer to that, but I just want to share that that is definitely one of the concerns that I have, is that we've been working so hard on reducing automotive traffic that does this, again, then give an incentive for people to drive easier. The other issue that I have here is that, every time I drive through the roundabout and down valley at all, I'm counting cars on the other side, and I'm looking at drivers. I'm looking at what is the traffic. And it's really difficult for me, with all the single occupant vehicles that I see, to listen to the people that complain about the congestion and the time that it takes to get in town, when it is those same very people that are the ones in that traffic and creating that traffic. So I just bring those last 2 points up as things that constantly remind me of how we're going to make the best decision moving our community forward here. And those are two of the questions that, continually stick out in my head. I just wanted to share those so everybody understands where my thinking is. And that's really all the questions I have. And we'll go down the line, and then we'll come back to answering the questions for tonight's direction. Go ahead, John.
I have a couple questions, but I think they will probably be answered when you bring us more information. One thing I'm super curious about, because the record of decision was for light rail, I'm wondering what the configuration is of where the stations are and like how it gets through, the light rail would get through Shale Bluffs and so on. Is there any information on that? And the other thing is I'm just really excited to be part of this process, because I think public transportation is the answer for decreasing our carbon footprint. And I will admit, I don't ride public transportation as much as I feel I should be. The only time I really ride it is to ski areas during the ski season. But I can tell you, I love trains. I've ridden them all over North America and Europe. And if there was a train that ran between here and Glenwood, I would take it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
A lot of people felt that way.
Well, and you also use a lot of bicycle transit, John, so you're not in a car when you're not on that bus.
It lives walkable from everything.
Anything else, John?
No, that's it.
Skippy?
I don't have any questions, just comments already.
Great.
Probably just one piece of feedback. Rachel talked about the importance of talking about the alternatives and why they were screened out, and then Mayor, you talked about reversible lanes. That is something the project team was talking about this morning, and the importance of that in the public education process so that people understand the why. And Mayor, to your point about if it reduces peak traffic, then it will encourage more single occupant vehicles. And you're correct. And I will tell you, when I sat down with John Kruger, and he was giving me, in his last few months, kind of the primer on entrance to Aspen, when he got to the part where he said, this does not reduce peak traffic, I kind of was like, I'm not sure, is that going to be okay for the community? But that will be something we'll need to communicate. And it is, your point is a good one, because it is one of those factors why it's probably good that it doesn't actually reduce. I mean, it reduces it by minutes, not what most people would want, which is I can go at whatever speed, the speed limit, and get out of town super fast. And it is the one thing, right? Congestion, pricing, and traffic are the two things that get people on public transit. And like you all, I'm a RAFTA. I was a RAFTA fan before I got here, because we all looked at other communities, look at what we have here, and envy it. And it's a fabulous system, and making improvements to it by allowing it to get in easier and faster. Oh, that's pretty cool.
You have something else right now, or?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, I think, is that the light rail that you were talking about is just from the airport into town, and then John, again, was talking about through Shale Bluffs and Valley Wide. So I want to,
Yeah.
what are we working with?
There was a light rail corridor in the Shale Bluffs four-laning process. And it's narrow, and it's against the shale wall, and it's like 12 feet wide, and Ralph has assured us there's a corridor there that was preserved. So that's all I know. Maybe some of it is supposed to go on what are currently our bus lanes. I don't know at that point where because the alternative was written to say, light rail is a final, but transportation, other measures can be taken to get there. So you could start with buses and go to light rail, or buses to trackless tram to light rail, or anywhere in between, I suppose, but it was, as long as it wasn't just suddenly becoming an unrestricted 4-lane.
Right, I just wanted to kind of reemphasize what Diane was saying, and what I think everybody in this room probably knows is if you build a bigger highway, it's going to just make more traffic. It's been shown in cities across the world.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I fully believe that too, and just to make sure we're not mistaken, there's just a replacement of the 2 lanes now, one in each direction. It's not additional laneage for SOVs. And that's why I would really propose that you start looking at the congestion pricing tool on the entrance, and that is where you can really start to have an effect on those SOV drivers.
I had Pete put the 10 objectives of the project, and transportation capacity is one of those objectives of this project, was to maintain those 1994, 95
Traffic count.
traffic counts, and that is one of the objectives of the record of decision.
All right, let's get to our questions so we can get some clear direction and get out in the sunshine. So this first question, supportive of the current ETA education scope. By that question, Trish, do you mean what we have here is the 3 components, technical analysis, engage with CDOT, and community education, or is that different?
It's a little, I'll just take this one. It's a little more, this is like the thing I get to do on this team of amazing technical people. I get to do the public engagement part. No, they let me hang out with them, so that's good.
Yeah.
This is the piece where we go out and we basically tell the community, right? And we inform, and trying to get everyone on the same page. And when I think about when Philip was here talking about the moratorium, and one of the things that surprised him about the community engagement process was that there were a lot of people who were new, and they didn't necessarily have that history and context. And in the short 2 years I've been in Aspen, one of the things I've realized is that everybody has an opinion about APSHA, and everyone knows what entrance to Aspen is and whether they like it or don't like it. And it's not, Trish mentioned earlier, the community shared understanding. That would be the goal of an education process. And the shortcoming, or the potential shortcoming of that, is that typically when people come into something, when they're invited to an open house or something, they want to share their thoughts, and they want to tell you what they want, and that wouldn't be the process here. This would be an information process, not a true formal community engagement process, which would be more extensive and more expensive. And there's value to doing both.
Okay, so this is just the education step.
Absolutely.
That includes creation of a website and document library, print campaign, community survey, and polling, public open houses, and grassroots videos. Mm-hmm. And the price tag on that is the allocated, is that within the allocated $150,000?
We believe so. We have not gone out to RFP yet because we wanted to get feedback from council before we went out to RFP. And I'm still hopeful that will fit under the $75,000 number. It's not completely clear, and as you know, our community engagement team here at the city is fully allocated right now, so we would need to get outside, and we think it'll be outside local expertise to help with this.
Okay, so the question for council is about the education scope, as it is stated clearly, and I didn't understand. Input.
Yeah, this is step 1 of that, scale that you're talking about. It's just purely informational, and yeah, I support it definitely.
Yeah. I support it as we're seeing it now. I think it's important to be thinking about the next steps, because you don't want to leave people hanging if they're all educated and want to start getting involved on it. So it'd be good to start thinking about the next steps. And, I don't have the history or budget in front of me to think about EOT expenditures on this, but I do recall when Chris Benden was planning director, There was effort that we called Plan in a Box or something, and they were distributing it. And I can't remember if we paid for that only as a city of Aspen, or because Highway 82 and the entrance affects Pickens County residents and Snowmass Village residents, whether there might be appropriate ask at some point for some assistance with the next phases of larger community outreach, because we're, I think, talking to our residents in Aspen and Aspen's congestion problems and issues, but the entrance affects people in Snowmass Village and the Airport Business Center and county residents just as much. And I think that there'll be a next step when we will want to see if we can take this further, perhaps with funding support from the EOTC. But I'd like to know there's a next step further down the line than we're just not going to do this and drop it.
Question one, and Rachel was just kind of leading into question two a little bit there, but question one, John?
Yes, I think it's necessary, and I'm all for it. Let's do it.
Skippy, input on question one about the education scope?
Can I have some some qualifying
Yeah, of
comments to
course.
help? Yeah, just so staff, I mean, these guys have heard this 10 times already, but just so you guys are clear, and that will guide my answers to these. I really appreciate sort of the broader conversation that we're having. Rachel talking about this being the right record of decision, the congestion charging, sort of a larger picture of a downtown core, and then, Ward, the continued advocacy for trackless tram, and John on the train. I support all of that. The way that I think about this project and the record of decision, and I agree moving forward, the record is the thing to follow if we're going to follow something. But if the record is completed as an end in of itself to reduce traffic and transit times, I see it as a predictable failure. I just will not be able to find in the future that spending several $100 million over probably a decade plus to reduce transit time by a few minutes, is worth it. However, as a tool, as a means to an end, I think it can be very successful. And the end, as Rachel alluded to, is really transforming the experience of downtown Aspen over time. If we can transition the roadways that we use for parking in cars to areas for community, for local and affordable business, for community gathering, for that intersection of people that we all really miss, well, then I think the record is the best tool to get there, and a really effective one. So if we are kind of moving this forward in that scope of taking that larger vision and figuring out how these things interact and get there, then I'm very supportive, and I can kind of go through these questions. If, however, we're saying it's just about the transit, then, I totally support the rest of my colleagues in moving forward. But, I would not want to give the public false hope of having my support. So, just kind of look to you guys. And if it's more of that broader vision, then I'm happy to provide guidance on these. Otherwise, it's all to you guys.
I'm going to circle back to that on question number 5.
You have a yes currently on question number 1. For me, I guess I'm just crossing the streams of the community education as step 3 in some project schedule, but this is not that.
It is, and thank you for bringing that up. The pieces, the first piece about updating technical materials and documents to the available technology, right? You think about the change between 2007 and today. The technological tools and the ability to visualize things is completely different. We have to do that, and the team actually already started on it because we knew no matter what we do, we have to get that stuff done. Yeah. And as well as those steps as far as is the record of decision stale? In other words, are there things that we have to do to make sure it's still alive and those types of things? That work has to be done regardless of what type of process we do.
Yeah, I think I get it. I think I'm getting it.
It's just like step 1 in a.
It really is.
Yeah, it is. And as Trish said, the piece with CDOT, which is step 2, is kind of a concurrent 1 and 2, right? Talking to them, keeping that conversation going. What does this look like? Working with the OTC, working with the mountain group, regional group.
Okay.
The one follow-up I do have, though, and Rachel alluded to this, wanting to know that there's a next step. And this gets to a little bit of question 5, but is there an expectation for how quickly that next phase will go? Or do you want us to come back in this process and say, okay, we're getting, it looks like the community's sort of interested in this, and come back early so we have more of a seamless process? I think, Rachel, does that make sense to you?
I'm just one of 5, but,
No, I'm
you
just-
know, I would want to start planning for the next steps so that we could potentially include them in our 2023 budget. And, you know, quite honestly, for me, finding out, are we going to go forward with this, or an improved this, let me put it that way, an improved record decision where we're adding the tools we need, like congestion pricing, that I guess I'm a little bit of a timeline that says, when is that federal infrastructure money going to be gone, and how do we tap into it? And so I'm looking at I'd imagine it's most appropriate to have any sort of open space vote when it's a general election, although by Tabor rules, you probably could have it any time. And so I personally would be walking backwards from like a November 24. At the furthest, I'd like to see the public start weighing in on this, and are we going to do something or not? You know, are we just going to keep patching the old bridge up? And, you know, I appreciate Tori's request for studying a 3-lane reversible where the new where the old Castle Creek Bridge is, but I don't know where how we direct the traffic for 2 years while it's being built. So that would be. But again, I'm thinking that, you know, you don't get people excited about something and then say, well, by the way, we'll talk to you again in 18 months, you know, and people will have questions, and they'll have ideas, and they'll want to find an avenue for them. But one way or the other, we'll probably see them discussed quite vigorously in the next city council election. And that's less than a year away.
Thank you,
Too
Rachel. And
soon.
the reason I
It's
picked
too
up on that in particular, it's a little self-interested. In one of the things about it's really helpful for staff to know the council is supportive of a community education process that has boundaries. One of the hard parts is it can be frustrating for people if they don't know there is a step 2. So that's part of the reason I've picked up on what Rachel has suggested, and just want to, I mean, we'll need to come back to you and with a formal request for funding. So I'm just looking at head nods about that makes sense. And then we're able to say to people, look, we're going to be doing some polling at the end of this, and if the community is supportive of moving to a next phase, which is not a build phase, it's a next phase in the process, then we will be engaging you more as a community in your ideas and thoughts. And
Yeah, I thank Rachel for bringing this up. It's been sitting dormant for quite a few years. I don't think we have the luxury of time seeing how long it takes to get projects approved, funded, and built. That I want to keep this process going. So definitely, education is not the end of the line. I want to continue going on towards actually doing something before the current Castle Creek Bridge falls into the creek.
John?
Yeah, I'd like to reemphasize what Ward just said. There's a timeline of how long the bridge is going to last. It takes about the same amount of time to get everything lined up and get construction started. And then there's the airport factor that we're not really thinking about, but they might be happening concurrently as well. And it'd be good to have our ducks in a row before that process starts.
Good thought.
all right, you just knocked question 1 out of the park. Let's see how we do.
Appropriate level of involvement for the EOTC, are you asking that as in relation to the education part of the program, or more next steps? And what Rachel says, hey, you know, eventually it's going to be, we'd want it to be more inclusive and more of a regional discussion.
So the team right now is scheduled, we had, when we were on the other council agenda a month ago or so, the team had planned to just go check in with Pitkin County, Snowmass, basalt? Not basalt, EOTC.
EOTC is snowmass and basalt. I mean, not basalt, but we can add basalt if,
And so that's more the question. Do you want staff to go and talk to those folks before we start a community education process?
And I'm going to jump in here because this is actually a conversation I've had with the county manager and Snowmass village manager. They are requesting that the educational program be brought to their boards. And that was a suggestion of the managers in lieu of using an EOTC meeting to do it, because they also would benefit from the educational background before taking positions as bodies regarding anything that may occur here. Or they can do it on their own and it really doesn't have as much of an impact, or at the EOTC table. So I strongly recommend that we have our staff visit with these other boards to provide that educational material to them.
And Trish, the second part, or Diane, the second part of that question is others. And Trish said that to get on the state's list, that you have to come from a county level. So it seems to me to be, the others is certainly just Picken County, but EOTC is necessary.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, the record of decision is a document that was signed off on by the city of Aspen and Picken County. I mean, they're signatories to the document. And so they've agreed with the conditions at that time and the program at that time. So I think if there's anything that was changing that program, that it's critical. I also think that in many ways, the EOTC was originally formed and the halfpenny passed to be able to deal with traffic congestion and management among the three entities. I mean, you look at the older EOTC documents, and, you know, it was like, strategically, no, we're not going to weigh in on whether Snowmass builds more parking or not. They're managing their traffic these ways, and we're the same. And but there was a mutual understanding that we affect each other. And when the origin and destination study was done back in the day, it showed that a lot of the traffic was generated between the golden triangle of Aspen, Snowmass, Airport Business Center, and the schools. You know, and we are the ones making most of the traffic. But who knows what that's going to be now. But, you know, our real capital money that we might be able to invest or put up as a local match is really seated in the EOTC and the savings account and the capital projects we have there. So there's no non-appropriate level for involvement of the EOTC. We're one community in that sense.
Well, I guess I don't have clarity yet on kind of how we're thinking as a group, if this is this project, you know, as the end in and of itself, or if we're looking at this as sort of the larger picture. If it's just the former, then, you know, I wouldn't support any of this stuff moving forward, because I wouldn't support the outcome regardless. If, however, we are taking that broader picture and recognizing that we don't know what that yet looks like, how long it will take, et cetera, which is totally reasonable, then I do have, you know, kind of answers to these. So I'm kind of waiting to hear from you guys.
And Skippy, one perspective from a staff perspective is, sorry to use that word twice, it is difficult for staff to enter into this project as a broader question simply because we do have a record of decision and a preferred alternative.
Yep.
And so question one is the community interested in this, or does the community want something else?
Yeah.
And that is the point at which you could then go to a bigger process. Alternatively, council is not precluded from discussing these other things, right? And many of them are either specifically mentioned in the preferred alternative, or are alluded to. So, right, if we come up with, if there's a new version of congestion pricing, or there's something else that the community can do that will not negatively impact the record of decision, I just think that this team's capacity to take that on right now could be really difficult.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarity. I understand that. You know, in the guise of moving forward in a broader picture, the record of decision is what I support. It's already there. You've got the pathway. That makes sense to me to use that as the tool rather than starting from scratch. As an N of one, if I wasn't sitting here, but I was in that meeting and you were coming in as staff and you said, hey, record of decision, we want to do this for or against, I would say against. But if you came to me and you said, record of decision, we want to do this because it will empower why, I would say, oh, thumbs up, right? And so I just know for me, the outcome of this is sort of contingent upon that. And so I would not want to give the public sort of false hope of my support of it as that narrow thing. And I also don't want to, ask you guys to go spend time and money on something that isn't going to matter to me. If that makes sense.
So we want your input.
Yes.
I want you to answer these questions with us. And the answer to you is yes, this is about the whole program. This is not just an exercise about are we building this or not. This is to evaluate this in the larger scope of everything we talk about. We want to find out it. First of all, this needs to be updated just so that it is more valid than it was. That's number one. We just need to get this so that it's current. Number two, to weigh this along with every other initiative. So, I mean, the overall goal here is transit and transportation, congestion, environmental improvement. That is what we're doing here. It's not just about this as the solution to that whole big question.
We all agree to that. I mean, this is really about the.
Yeah, I have comments that I've jotted down, but it's, I have them categorized under 4 and 5, but I think that to give you reassurance that I'm not zeroing in on 7th and Main Street. That's not the end of my involvement in this. I think that what Tori said, that the quality of life in Aspen, I think involves decreasing greenhouse gas, decreasing the number of cars that are in town.
Increasing mass transit.
Well, yeah, increasing mass transit to get the people here, but not in cars. I have absolutely no interest in building a parking space under Wagner Park, because that means those cars have to come in town and circulate in town. That is that's a no starter for me. So I'll try to combine some of these. I don't support linking approval for an entrance to Aspen to a car-free downtown. I want it to be a path in that direction, but I don't want to handcuff this process by linking it to tearing up the streets and making them business incubators and downtown restaurants. But as a long-term, long-range goal, I envision that as being better for quality of life and for Aspen, but I don't want to handcuff this by linking it to that.
I appreciate that clarity.
I'd just like to add that I'm hoping this improves the quality of life for the whole valley.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I agree with Ward's statement on this, and you're starting to get into all sorts of technical stuff that we don't even begin to have the answers to. But, if the right-of-ways were given to the city for roads, for transportation, we might not be able to just turn them over to, quote, public use. They would go back to the property owners on either side, just like an abandoned rail line. And that could be more of a lot of different issues that we will want to talk about. And to me, it would kind of be like me saying, well, I'm not going to be able to support the lumberyard unless the record of decision's going forward. Because, and to me, I'm not going to link those two things. But I think it's very important to be able to deal with the entrance to improve the mass transit that will be servicing the lumberyard. And so they're not stuck in mixed traffic at the roundabout when they try to come into town or go out of town, because very quickly they'll say, why not drive my car? And so, I just don't appreciate the linkage, and I think that at some level, some people are really very fearful of a village that it's all pedestrian and they can't get around in. I mean, I've just heard it from people. Don't tell Skippy I'm older now and I need my car and I'm not going to go into town if I can't park somewhere, So I just don't want to, we could Christmas tree this to the point it just tips over.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that, and I understand the rationale, and you should tell those people that pedestrian-centric doesn't mean you can't get somewhere on wheels in a safe way. You can do both. The reason that I link them is I just think about the things that we're currently losing, that we all feel, the sense of place, a business you could interact with, all those things. This is probably a 10-year project. If we wait till sort of the end of that to start saying, oh, how do we transform the downtown core? Well, 20 years from now, I'm not convinced that even if we build all the affordable housing in the world, people haven't made the decision of like, well, I have this place and I have the mountains, but I don't belong here, I don't fit in, and they've already left. And so now there's like, what is the point of even doing it? So for me, it's just about the timeline of how do we move these things forward and start to plant that seed in the heads of people and get them in that place. So,
Skippy, we are going forward this summer with a
Living lab.
living
Yeah.
lab for pedestrian and bicycle safety. So we're working on that direction as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
The last piece of question 2, I believe I heard in a prior discussion you had with the EOTC folks that there will be some post-retreat discussion that EOTC will have about this. And we'll plan and be ready for that.
Oh, it will. Yeah. I mean, I don't see a way around that. I think it's absolutely necessary. Do you have enough information on number 2, a level of appropriate? I mean, really, Sarah outlined the fact that you guys you're doing some outreach. You've been requested to even do some check-ins. So, I mean, that can evolve as it goes.
Right. I appreciate everyone saying that they have a sort of broader vision. So I'm happy to answer these questions and, assume that we're all kind of pointed in that direction, if at a different, in a different way. And I also look forward to, at the EOTC and other places, having that broader discussion and you guys participating in that. So with that in mind, I'm happy to support number 1, and I do think it's important to involve the EOTC for all the reasons that we discussed around coalition building and actually getting the project done, and for further discussions about the bigger picture.
Thanks, Gibby. Number 3, can you just clarify a little bit what you mean by this?
So it could range from, do you want monthly updates from us? Would you prefer info-only memos, as well as what is your physical role in the process? Do you want to be present at the open houses? Do you want to have some kind of level of involvement as individual council members in the community education process so that we could know to program that in?
I'll start with myself and then look around. I want you to use me as you see fit. How do I fit in and work with you to get our communication and education out there? That's how I want to be deployed myself. As far as council goes,
That's exactly where I was going, Mr. Mayor, is how does the city council, not 5 individual council members, but
Right.
how does the city council want to be engaged in this? And that's a really critical point for clarity, because as individuals, you're not as influential in the process as you are, really, you're not at all. It's as a collective group that you will have the most influence. Thank
well, and again, Sarah, I would look at you then, because regularity of updates. I don't know the work plan. I don't know the day. I don't know.
I mean, an example is listening sessions.
Yeah.
Does the council wish to host listening sessions? There's things like that we can bring back to you as options. I think maybe what we can do is put a little more meat on this question. I think it's a little too open-ended right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that when you say listening sessions, it sounds like we've moved from education into feedback.
That's what I was going to say.
And that would be totally appropriate time and everything. For me, the one thing I guess I think would be important would be to kind of have council have a chance to vet some of the language or how it's coming out that's going to be then presented to the public. just either for accuracy or if anything's missing, or if there's conclusions that we would like to add that this would enable that, or this might not enable that, or, I just don't know. But that's all I can really think of, other than if this is an educational process, I'd like us all to be equally educated, and perhaps the presentations to us first, and this recorded for grassroots, if it seemed appropriate, and I realize what Sarah is saying is speaking for all of us who are working as a council, but I do, for me, recognize the mayor's leadership role of the council. But, if there's a grassroots show that you wanted to have council members on or participating on, things like that, I think that that's appropriate.
And thank you, Sarah and Rachel. I think that idea of us coming to city council for the kickoff process and the community knowing that the council supports this effort will be really important.
Yeah, on number 3, I want the city council to push the ETA. It's an Aspen problem that affects the entire valley. So we should frame the discussion and seek support from EOTC and others. And I think the city council should support, well, I don't support more in-town parking. Discussion on congestion pricing, and the community needs to be engaged and energized. So I want to keep moving from inform, educate, to consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. I want to keep that process going so that the city council can be the pusher on this. That's what I feel that my role should be, that towards the goal of a greater Aspen as far as greenhouse gas, pedestrian safety, use of city streets more for pedestrian. I feel that vision should be articulated here at this table and shared with the community, and that we need, I think, to get the community engaged and move this process along, because, like I said, we don't want to be sitting here discussing the entrance to Aspen when the Castle Creek Bridge falls into the Castle Creek.
And yet we might. Don?
Someone might.
Yeah, thank you.
What Ward said, I think one thing will follow the other, too. Once we figure out this entrance to Aspen thing, I think we will probably have a more pedestrian-friendly community to start making it even more pedestrian-friendly. I think this is a natural step in that process, and I think full steam ahead.
I agree entirely with how Ward put it. I really thank you for that. And it does strike me that as we go out, or how does council want to be involved in this process, I think we want to uphold the 10, I call them the scoping goals or whatever, the 10 goals. We want to uphold those and make those real. And that was improving transit, improving air quality, improving livability, all those things. And I think that is a little bit of a framework for your future presentations. Not exactly, but those were the screening tools that everything was held up against. Which ones help us promote the mass transit the best? Which ones help us control traffic growth the best? Which ones help us with the air quality the best? And so I think using those tools, as you've alluded to, and I think other communities who perhaps didn't have as sophisticated a council and Mayor Bennett at that time, ended up with EISs and RODs that did not consider a lot of those factors at all. And you could pull up a number that, it's just, that's not where the work went. And we're lucky that we were able to push through those. And those were chosen with the county. And, those were joint goals for the outcome of this. So I think that really is a tool and a gift that, if anything, we're talking to the community. Do you still support those goals? Are those still the scoping criteria you'd put out in a new ROD, if we ever did a new ROD? Thank you.
You know, Rachel, that's an important point that we've talked about those 10 items, those 10 factors, but we haven't talked about one of the really important parts of the community engagement process. It's not just to educate, community education process. It's not only to educate about the what, it's to educate about the why, right? The 10 factors. What I don't think most people understand, if we had the Marshall Fire here, what does emergency egress look like? As I've started to learn about that, it's frightening. And the third piece is, and I was talking to the mayor about this today, someone said to me, you know, if you can make the same amount of money in Willits, Carbondale, Glenwood, why would you come to Aspen if you have to
Deal with this.
go through traffic? And I know for me, right, I'm moving to Missouri Heights. I'm so excited to get on the bus and not drive to work. That's exciting for me. And right, but making sure we communicate the why is critical.
Yeah.
Question number 4.
Couldn't I answer?
I know Ward's answer, I think.
I got a quick one.
Yeah, let's just share, you know, what's in your estimate of success? John?
I better not go first.
Then I will. I have low expectations. I'm really happy that this conversation is up. I'm glad that we're getting information. I'm glad that we're getting everybody on the same page. It's much like I feel about the housing strategic plan that we've been working on. So for me, success is going through this process, having the community dialogue that we're going to have. You want to go second?
Sure, I was going to say, if we're not recalled. But I'll go with what you said.
Skippy?
That was awesome. I didn't answer 3 yet. You know, what we're talking about here is basically inform, and so I don't feel like I really need to be involved in that. As was said here, when we get to that more collaborative state, then I'd love to be involved in sharing in painting that bigger vision and working with the citizens in an active way to cultivate that. And I also agree with these guys on number 4.
Go ahead.
Rachel?
You've been doing so well. Okay. I was going to say, an understandable document would be a key, you know, or the updated work, or however we want to look at it, that the explanations are in plain English instead of lawyerese or federal highwayese or something, you know, that it's that the choices our community has are made relatively clear through the document. And the other factors that we're all weighing here at this table, the life of the bridge, the potential availability of money, the changing demographics of our workforce, and what is it going to really take to continue to entice a workforce this far up the valley. But, you know, the main thing is that it's an understandable process, that the construct of you have an older bridge, something's going to happen one day. And as you said eloquently in our memo, the choices that are made here will really shape the future direction of the town in many ways. So that's what I really am looking for, is for folks to understand the choices ahead of us. Even if we choose to not make a choice, we know that's no action is always one part of an EIS, but that it's understandable and good graphics. Thank you.
And Ward?
I guess my question hinges on. No, it's Ward.
Correct.
Mike's over there. Depends on the definition of this process. If we're talking about just the educational piece, clarity and a good foundation to move forward with the other pieces that, you know, consult, involve, collaborate, empower. But my forward answer was fewer cars in town. But if we're talking about just this first piece,
That's not there yet.
it's to pave the road, to put the foundation, for moving forward.
No, I agree. If this process takes cars off the road, I'm with him. That is success.
You know, if you're going through that phases, if you get to the empower point, it would be a chance for the public to vote yes or no on an alternative for them. You know, that's the point at which they're empowered to say yes, no, stop, go. That's much further down the line, but if we really are going through that sequence of events, that's the final empowerment of people to say, go ahead and start pursuing the money, or let's drop it again for another 10 years. So,
And if we get there, one of my goals is that we know going into it that it's not going to be 4852.
Got enough on number 4? Question number 5, expectations that have not been discussed.
I think we discussed them. It would be to accomplish the work as set out in the memo and as discussed at this table. Quite perfunctory.
John, any additionals?
I don't know, for me, it's like asking me what the unknown unknowns are.
Right.
I'm not sure. Expectations, I just say, I feel like staff's going to meet my expectations. You're going to help educate us and the public, and I'm excited to get this process going.
Rachel?
yeah, I guess that we're creating a framework for future civil discussions about what to do, you know, how to do it. You know, I've already talked about understandable that our opportunities and the real issues that, you know, confront us at the table as we look at it are understood. But how do we move from this one chunk to the next chunks would be, again, how do you frame it so that people are all have the same education level, same facts, and can begin a civil dialogue about what would we like to do as a community going forward. So that would be an expectation of the process.
And just to clarify, I think you said it's that particular expectation is for like a phase 2, not a phase 1.
Yeah, pretty much. I think, you know, if we can just get people beginning to talk about this and to say, you know, because I hear from some people who are concerned about evacuation. I hear from other people who this is no problem at all, and I live in town anyhow, so I don't deal with it that much, kind of answer. But are they aware of all the factors that go into a decision like this and the need? And for me, it's the potential of the federal dollars that are available in many ways with the infrastructure. That won't be there again.
Yeah, I had jotted down to establish value-based process, evaluate how options affect the city traffic and quality of life in the core as well as West End, avoid linkage to outcomes such as mentioned before. I want this to go forward, but not at the expense. I don't want to, I think I expressed myself earlier. I just don't want to link this to something that I envision as continuing to move along the process of fewer cars in town, more pedestrian friendly, but really to move it along and have a value base. And somewhere in this document, I made notes, I can't find it now, but Rachel reminded me of it, that community engagement, and try not to get to a point where a decision prevents the community from accepting a decision that may not be to their liking, that we can have acceptance from different people of the community, that we can see a common goal and a common need. And if we don't get exactly what we want, that we can accept it and support it, and not handcuff it because it's not exactly what I want or Tori wants, or John wants, or other residents want, so that we can all start off with the understanding that this is the best thing that we can do for this town and work towards that process without polarizing and making a dualistic process.
And Ward, I think we all, at least just definitely from a staff perspective, we do believe this is the best we can do for the community. There are going to be people out of the gate who don't agree with that, and strongly and vocally.
Yeah.
So, right, there's a certain part of the population we will not be able to move. It's
Yeah,
just-
there's political triage. I understand that. There's some people who are not going to move. Some people are going to be in favor of it, and we focus on that group in the middle, how we get them engaged and supportive.
Cool. And can you mention the part you said about that included the West End? I just missed that in my notes.
Well, not only are we concerned with creating a better downtown core, but we've heard a lot of complaints and concerns from residents in the West End because of the West End creep. So-
Bypass.
Yeah, and so our goal, I think, is to, the end result is fewer cars in town. You have fewer cars in town, you hopefully won't have a West End creep. And a lot of those new people in the West End will, it's going to take a long time before we can get this accomplished. But we're working in that direction, and we have to get buy-in from the West End residents as well to know that this ultimately is the best for them and for the community, and that we're looking for support and engagement and collaboration from all segments of the community.
And I agree with you, and I believe I understand. I think the one piece, though, that may be a hot button is when we say to the people on the West End, this may not help you, right? Where it doesn't affect peak traffic travel times, people may still detour through the West End. That's just a reality. And we won't, right? The worst thing we can do as staff is sugarcoat on one end or be overly alarmist.
Yeah, we can't promise what we can't guarantee.
Right.
And so we can work towards a solution, but we can't guarantee that no one's going to be going down Smuggler.
Yeah, you okay?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you kind of going back and forth on it a little bit. There's different ways in which it may improve, or it can be improved to improve, but I think it may be odd thing to say, but there might be a lot of factoids you guys will want to include in this, where people are going to ask, well, what about building a big parking garage underground here? And you can say, well, is it $90,000 a space average now, or is it 45? I mean, people have no concept of what building a 100-car parking garage might really cost you, or how you run it or maintain it. But we hear that a lot, that our solution is just, if we just had a big parking garage somewhere. And, you know, the reason I really think of this is a good friend of ours, Don Shealy, would insist that all we really needed was a big overpass at Brush Creek. There shouldn't be a traffic light there, just build an overpass. And the same with the Airport Business Center. And then you try to get back to the fact that, well, you need somewhere around 10 or 20 acres to build one of those big overpasses and underpasses. And they do those on the interstate, but they don't usually do them on state highways. But those are the type of factoids or information people are going to want, or to ask, or to throw out there of, well, why hasn't anybody done this? Or why don't we just connect the community with gondolas? And, you know, so you might want to kind of take a look at some of the random things that'll come up to see if there's answers for them, or information, or we could get there. And that kind of brings me back to one other thing that's not necessarily a factoid, and I don't want you to engage in any conjecture, but the question is out there of what would a new ROD be like? What would, you know, does it mean that we would, again, talk with Aspen and Picken and Snowmass and say, we still agree with these 10 quality agreements? Or would we pick just 3 of them that matter now? Or how could how could it change? Or could we win more? Could we lose more? I don't know. But, again, that ROD process, who would pay for it? How much would it cost? Just, it's part of the whole series of the ball of wax of what we're facing as a community. That's what I'm trying to get to, of how do we answer the different questions that are going to come up. And one of those is, what about doing a new ROD and getting a better answer? And you can talk about what is the process for a new ROD or not. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
John, did you have a comment here?
No, I think Rachel covered it.
I want to make one last comment for myself. I want to be very clear. I am very supportive of this process. For me, it is, along with the public perhaps, it's an educational process and an evaluative process for me. My support for this process does not inherently suggest my support for building a new entry into Aspen. I'm definitely going to be engaged in this to find out if this checks the boxes for our values. Yeah. And I think there's great alignment about our overarching goals. And this to me is really bringing it back to say, is this the best way to achieve our goals? That's how I'm looking at this.
Great.
Great. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Guys.
Just take a quick 5.
Yeah, and then we're just coming back for a little quick discussion. It was nice to see the intersection work commencing over there by City Market. Yeah.
Gracias.
I hope you guys have a smooth time of scheduling and resources and stuff. As smooth as it can be. I mean, the hurdles that are thrown up in front of everything these All right, we are back. This is our Monday, the 18th work session. We just got done with agenda item number 1, which was entrance to Aspen Education Project. We are now on to council board reports and council updates. Just a moment for council to discuss other matters. And we got no updates from John, and we're on to Skippy.
Best repeater I can do. APSHA meeting last, or I guess it was on the 6th, teased this in the last council meeting we had, but we approved the survey to go out to homeowners to understand what, if anything, would encourage or incentivize them to move into a unit that provides net bedroom gain for the community. We got a update from Allison Bektesh and Francie, who had a conversation with residents of the trailer park where the Standards for Sellers program pilot is proposed for, which was helpful. And that was really it. We also have our meeting this Wednesday has those same things coming up. It also has our quarterly.
Just do it.
It also has our quarterly home truck update. We did not get in our packet the new home truck reports. It's going to be presented for the first time at the meeting. However, at each of those meetings, there's always the opportunity for, hey, it'd be really interesting to know X that we don't currently know, or to put together data from Z and Y to create new understanding. So if any of you guys have any additional information requests that you could send to Rachel and I, and though we don't have the new report, you could certainly go onto the Home Truck website and pull up the most recent report that we got and say, oh, this is really missing. Can you please voice desire to see that in the next one? That's it.
Thank you. Any board reports?
Yeah, I'm trying to draw this up. I'll pull this up. The RAPTA board meeting, it was on the 14th.
Microphone.
Mike?
Nice job, Amy.
Good name calling that time.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the packet here, but I'll give you from my notes. First of all, Art Riddle suggested or said that SILT is interested in joining RAFTA. There was a discussion about a citizen complaint about lights going across from the Glenwood Springs Maintenance Facility construction, bus queuing, lights going across the river. We had some discussion about RAFTA is not exempt from lighting ordinances, and that RAFTA is going to work on trying to make sure when the buses are queued up that their lights aren't on. There was we extended the remote meetings for 2 months that we need to have. There was an interest in changing the bylaws so that remote participation could become part, a permanent part, permanent feature. But we just extended for 2 months so we could have the time to make those changes in the bylaws. Everybody strongly encouraged being in person. But there are times when it would be really useful for people to be able to participate fully remotely, and that applies here to this board as well. As we have seen with...
Hang on one sec.
And actually, that's something I have on the list for the council to discuss about your expectations of boards and commissions. That we need to get some resolution around if you have any expectations about remote, hybrid, or in-person, particularly those that have public hearings. So just as a heads up, that will be a forthcoming conversation. Thank you.
And as we've seen with the roundabout, with the bus stop improvement by the old library, just about every other project, the 27th Street Park and Ride project came in way above budget what was expected. And it was decided to take that overage out of capital reserves. We did have a pretty good discussion about FLAM, first and last mile. The WeCycle and RAFTA, I think, is going to look at taking over management of the whole system with a multi-year expansion first in some areas that don't have WeCycle, and adding some stations in Aspen and other places in some of the out years. But like five plus at the Aspen Airport Business Center in 2024, and Buttermilk and Burlingame, 5 more in 2023. But some of the staffing and control and maintenance or administration of WeCycle, we might offload some of the city and see some savings at the city side since RAFTA will be taking over valley-wide management of the first and last mile. And really the first and last mile is really centered on WeCycle. There was a discussion about some of the capital, the financial position of RAFTA is very strong, and actually the capital reserves, the cash reserves have increased in the last couple of years. And there was a cash balance of about $79 million. And so there was some discussion about it. I think we've discussed it with the workforce housing of spending money now because the return on investment of safe investments is well below what construction inflation is. So it's better to use that cash to help build the 27th Street and other capital projects. There's housing that's part of the capital projects for RAFTA as well. And there were discussions about funding in the rates to leverage building now instead of waiting later. And and I think the final topic of discussion was fare-free regional service between Aspen and Glenwood. It's not free service because we all know nothing's free, but not charging a fare for that transportation. There was a pilot program in Utah that was fare-free, and it increased ridership by 16%. And the percentage of the revenue derived from fares, Tori, you might remember this better than I, but I think it was less than 2% of the budget of the revenues. And it's like, let's just keep moving towards a fare-free transit system up and down the valley, that the increase in ridership might really be worth it. And then we had a Sister Cities meeting. We had a presentation by a couple of students that had presented artwork for Sister City International. We had updates. It looks like Shimakapu might be the first to have actual exchange. The park exchange with Bariloche is going forward with Mike Tunde and Austin Weiss from the city going to Bariloche. This is a discussion that commenced before COVID. Bariloche came to us because of our outstanding parks about helping them design a park next to a national park. And so that's going forward, and Sister Cities was really appreciative of the in-kind support from the city of Aspen on that. Queenstown 30th anniversary is coming up. There is, Timba is somebody that's living in Shimakapu now and has had some regular columns in the newspaper. That's been well received. There have been some 2D virtual exchanges. It seems like Chamonix might be getting more active. They've had we've had some problems with active participation on the other side. There's a local art exchange, a medical exchange with Bariloche going out in September. And with that, I will, Bariloche has 20 students, it looks like, and Davos is interested in an exchange, and Davos has really been dormant for a long time.
I thought, yeah.
Yeah.
Real quickly, I did send council members a copy of the RAFTA agenda. And he just spoke to just about every item on there. And then just on Sister City stuff, I wanted council to remember that we passed by resolution recently and updated our relationship with our sister cities. But as Ward describes, part of the reason we did that is to re-engage and reinvigorate some of those relationships that are languishing a little bit. But this council did our part in that. Along with that, I sent a letter recently with Jill Shealy, the president of the board right now, to those communities to say, hey, we are still here. We still value this program, and we want to just, help you if you're waning on your side, but we're still here and engaged. So,
Very nice.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. I'll take a look at that raft agenda. I always have a little concern about the idea of it being fully free. Just the original concern with the half penny was that eventually there wouldn't be any money for doing capital because it would all be operating. And we're close to that now with well over 81% of that, the half penny. So, and that it can get to be something that's sometimes just taken for granted when something's free. But I certainly agree with trying to support lower rates and trying to get greater ridership back, which I think people still have some concerns about the pandemic on. I was out of town for the last couple of weeks, so I really haven't attended too many meetings. Yeah, it was kind of nice. But I did want to kind of go back over one from a while ago and see where we are with it. But House Bill 21-1164 was passed last year, and it requires each school district to raise their mill 1 mil a year until they can hit their total program maximum mills and support themselves without state assistance, or if they hit their total maximum mill levy they're allowed and still need state assistance, they'll get it. But, given that we're going to see the expiration of the city's sales tax contribution to the school district, and the question of reauthorizing it will be coming up again, it'd be good to kind of track how that bill is working, and is the school district raising their mill levy as they need to, and where will they be in close to a total budget when that as this takes effect. And so I think that's a Pete Strucker question for later, but I know he's pretty busy right now with STRs. But I'd love to see where we are with that, because we all know we have potential needs for whether it's childcare support or other programs that we'd like to be implementing. And it'd be nice to see the school district fully supporting itself. And then I was just going to spend another couple of minutes on the watershed forum I had gone to before. And I'll pass along the program. The speakers were really great. And I've brought the business cards back for our state forester and the regional forester for the USDA and through the Department of Agriculture. And they were just so clear that if we will adopt a plan for where we need to mitigate on the public lands to protect our infrastructure and community, they will find ways to fund it. And they're just looking to really do all this work they haven't been funded to do before. So, I'm just, as we all are, concerned about wildfire access and the changing fire behavior in Colorado. It's gotten really severe, and, I just don't see the drought passing away. I'd love it if it did. There's a picture I saw today of the Rio Grande River in Texas where it had turned into a dry bed because there's so little water getting out of the Rio Grande in Colorado down to that way. So we just need to be ahead of this. And there's a couple of different groups that are forming, and it's interesting because you get a lot of people involved in knowing that healthy watersheds, healthy forests are so important to the overall program. But there's a new group, the National Wild Turkey Federation, which had helped pay for not the whiskey and not the tourist. It's a national wild, they help pay for this conference. And then there's another one, Healthy Communities. And the real challenge is that harvest, manage, and reforest is, one of the greater tools is actually the forestry industry for controlling the overgrowth in some of our forests. Control burns, the massification of wood, and the forest industry. And that's about all we really have for tools. And we're surrounded by, as they call it, landscape scale, millions of acres around us, ready to burst into flame when the time's right, because that's what forests do. And I just want to make sure we are thinking about adopting a plan of where we would like to see some control burns and some harvest on our, maybe not harvest, but domestication work around our critical electric and water infrastructure, let alone, town perimeter. And I don't know where to take that because I know we're already way overboard. Well, I know there was a regional fire council meeting a couple weeks ago, but I had heard we weren't in attendance, and I was a little concerned about that.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
Yeah. First, we weren't in respond because the scheduling of it was during our liaison had an existing commitment. Our liaison to that group is Austin Weiss. But we have been doing some additional planning around what our requests are to Pickens County for the mitigation plan, because it's not really a City of Aspen utility mitigation plan, it's a county mitigation plan, risk mitigation. And we've been in those discussions with Valerie over at the Pickens County Sheriff's Office at a high level. But we've been going back through to prioritize particular areas that we see greater vulnerability due to less about the actual water flow, but about the infrastructure that is in that area.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to comment on that. I ran into Valerie, I think it was yesterday, and she mentioned that there's a tabletop on fire mitigation, or wildfire, that's at Mountain Rescue Building Thursday from 9 till noon. And if somebody from council, I know that conflicts with my core meeting, but she felt that it was appropriate that if somebody from council wanted to be there, certainly everybody's welcome.
Say the date and time again?
It's this Thursday, 9 till 12 at Mountain Rescue.
So this is a pretty technical tabletop. So I just want to warn you, it'll be a lot of jargon. Because we'll be in incident command mode, so we won't be someone there to interpret for you what's occurring. But certainly, please let me know if you're planning on attending so that we ensure we have proper notice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I work that day at my other job, so I won't be attending. But I'd be delighted to know that we have some staff attending.
It's actually pretty limited what our staff involvement would be in this type of tabletop. It depends on what essential functions are stood up, and that's where our role comes in. For most of that, the decision of, when it gets to evacuations or things like that, I just want to be clear that we aren't going to be incident command. None of our city staff are typically the incident commander
Right.
at a fire scene wearing their City of Aspen hat. Now, some of our City of Aspen staff are also with the fire district, and they may do it jointly. But I just want to clarify that we have a supporting role in all of this, not a lead role. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
I don't have board reports this evening, but I wanted to just bring one thing up at council table. And there's been some emails going around about it recently. The discussion about the old Taster space, the Rio Grande restaurant space right across the Galena Plaza from us has come up. The city's schedule for activating that space in the actual location, is challenged right now. Even if we were to start that process today, now, it takes a while, it's a lengthy process. One alternative or option, possibility, is the opportunity for a food truck or a food stand or some kind of service that's in those parking spots that's right out in front of that space. Right now, we don't have the ability, or Sarah doesn't have the ability to go out via our code to find an operator or even to find out if anybody's even interested in doing that. But Sarah said to me that, hey, if that is something that you're interested in, she would just need direction from council to say, yes, if there was an opportunity, however that goes. I think it'd probably be an RFP process, or maybe not, or I don't know, but.
I think we need to get letters of interest and understand it might be like a rotating. I don't think someone's going to want to park there for the whole summer, nor do we want the effects of one vendor parked in one spot all the time. But if there's a general direction that council is interested in exploring it, we just bring you back. We think this is what works for this summer, and here's what you would need to waive in the code to make it happen.
I think I know, at least I remember, that when we were discussing the Galena Plaza, that we did have discussions about food services, maybe a truck up on Galena Plaza. I think I would be supportive if we could have something temporary. I know the last time that we put out a request for a food truck, we didn't, I think it was EOTC, but we didn't have any interest. Nobody wanted to do it. But if there is interest, to either be down on the parking spot or up here on the mall, I would for this summer, until we can go through a formal RFP for the Tasters spot, I would support having some kind of food services for this area.
Thanks, Ward. Rachel, any input?
Yeah, I would be supportive of taking a look at that and giving her the direction that, yes, you can look to whatever special waiver or code change we might need for that as a temporary basis. But as I had suggested at one of our last meetings, I'd really like to know what we would need to do as a supplemental to augment staff, to have the capacity to also get that Tasters RFP out moving sooner than the current timeline. And I think that that's important. But as an interim, Tori, I think that that's a good suggestion.
I'll second what Rachel just said.
Okay. Your mic's not on, but.
I'll second what Rachel just said.
And what you just said.
And what I just said.
Yeah, I'm definitely supportive of looking at this. I think finding a local or a valley operator would be wonderful. Slow Groovin comes to mind, but like you said, no one's going to go buy and outfit a food truck for a potential temporary thing. And I think what's important is giving us the food option now and just sort of introducing Aspen to the idea of a food truck as well, because we haven't really had them. So if that looks like, even a different truck each weekend over the summer, and we're kind of picking and choosing the best of Denver who want to come up, I'm fine with that too. Because I think this is kind of a first step in a broader conversation if we want to have any affordable eats, because the free market rent is not going to provide them.
Well, there is it Star Bakery, or was the name of it, at the Airport Business Center that does the food trucks around
yeah.
all the construction sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they might be interested, but I think your Rio Grande user pool might be a little different market than some of the higher-end food trucks. When you look at kids who often a hamburger is grilled cheese is about as far as they want to go. It's not trying exotic new delicacies, which I would try from a food truck. But anyhow, that's just fodder for future thought.
Oh yeah, but yeah, you're just going to have a ton of people who want to get delicious, affordable food.
Period.
Yeah, period. I will walk from wherever I'm living.
I will mention that I heard on NPR that Soylent Green is 50 years old now, so I don't
what you're
suggest that
proposing?
is.
Past its best buy date.
I think Soylent's even passed muster in Silicon Valley.
So there was an interesting point brought up there that Sarah would also need clarification on. The last time we went through these discussions, as we were working towards the possibility of food truck service, one thing that this council and others have really stuck to was saying, like, well, we'd prefer that it was an existing brick and mortar building that was going to be afforded these opportunities. I'm hearing from some that it doesn't necessarily that doesn't need to be a constraint in this outreach effort to find out if any people are interested.
Just to clarify, I would absolutely prefer that it is Aspen, an existing known quantity, but if that's not available, I'm willing to move out of that onion.
Right.
Yeah.
Warm food.
And
Not just looking
delicious.
for a warm body, we're looking for warm food.
And I just want to manage expectations, like we just finally found a vendor to support Brush Creek Park and Ride, and it took a lot to convince that to happen. And so they're about to present the lease to me to review at the staff. I point to Kate, because Kate's the one who told me today that they got that far.
It's a local from Glenwood is where they're coming from, but I do think that took a lot of effort on the part of the EOTC liaison to find somebody willing, because they wanted to offer that opportunity up to anybody who was interested. So,
Right. Which, yeah. I also didn't comment on, Rachel, what you said about moving the process forward, just for staff, is I would also support moving the process forward. The red line for me is that it doesn't push our moratorium or housing work back. As long as it doesn't do that, yes, but if it does, then I'll wait.
And that's why I couched it in that it would probably require a supplemental for the appropriate staff to do it in a timely fashion without impacting current workload and schedules, which I don't want to do. I understand that we have Sarah under the gun and the rest of our staff under the gun with possibly more asked than ever before from a city council and a city government. And so the only way to do it, in my mind, is really to bring forth some supplemental general fund dollars to spend. It's part of getting our community back to being whole from a number of changes that have occurred during the pandemic. And that biggest one is the loss of affordable takeout or affordable place for our kids to go when they're hanging at the skate park.
Yeah.
And so let's see what we can do to move that forward.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and Kate, to your, well, not your point, but staff's, EOTC's experience of having difficulty finding someone in the valley, it's not surprising, right? I mean, people don't build businesses that they're not allowed to operate, and restrictions in the valley have kind of told food service individuals that we're not interested in that, and so there's not a lot that exists. The few that I can think of are really catering trucks that park at weddings. They're not like built as a traditional food truck, or the truck that Rachel mentioned that stops at every construction worker site and has, kind of pre-wrapped meals. But I think, if we can have once we have a summer where, whether it's someone from here or not, demonstrates that people are actually going to come and buy that food, and there's, a recognition that some of those policies might change. Well, I think a lot of people that, whether they're restaurateurs that have lost their restaurant space or will, if the rent goes up again, which it will, people will start thinking about, oh, this might be a better opportunity for me.
I just want to add that the truck Rachel's talking about, when they come to
The horn, I love the horn.
Yeah, it's La Cucaracha.
Yes, I know, I love it. Yes, I've worked at enough places where that truck came.
That's one of them. There's actually a couple others. You guys have seen the truck that services Ruggerfest, the big red truck. So there's a couple of opportunities. This is not going to be an easy find or an easy fix. We're just given the opportunity, so we'll see if it materializes or not.
Love it.
All right, thank you. That'll be our agenda this evening. Let's adjourn this work session, and we'll be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Oh, no, not back here. We will actually be over at BOCC tomorrow at 4 p.m. for our joint
Said
meeting.
that out loud, or I would have been right here confused.
Yes.
And we are meeting in person, because I got a Zoom invite from them.
They do hybrid.
Okay, so we could do either.
Some don't enjoy going, I hear.
You probably could, yes. Some of them aren't that interested. Thank you, Grassroots.
Thanks, guys.
Mike!